Guitar Will Travel presented by Vintage Guitar Magazine. With your host, me, James Patrick Regan, otherwise known as Jimmy from the Deadlies, and today I'm speaking with guitarist and educator Matthew Stevens. In our conversation, Matthew takes us through living in Boston and teaching at Berklee College of Music, and he talks about the struggles of playing instrumental jazz music. Matthew discusses his new album, appropriately titled Matthew Stevens, and the personnel and production of the album. Matthew talks about growing up in Toronto and his start on guitar and eventually his introduction to jazz, which led him to Berklee as a student after playing in rock bands in school. Matthew describes working as a guitarist on a cruise ship at the age of 18 to pay for his Berklee education, and he tells us about his early jazz influences. Matthew describes going on tour right out of school and eventually working with Esperanza Spalding, and Matthew talks gear from the beginning until now and his preferences of Telecasters and box amps. Matthew talks tour plans and the expense of touring and touring as a sideman. To find out more about Matthew, you can go to his website, mattstevensmusic.com. That's mattstevensmusic.com. Please subscribe, like, comment, share, and most of all, review this podcast. I'd really appreciate it. And please support Vintage Guitar Magazine and all the wonderful things they do for us guitar players, because they do so many wonderful things for us guitar players. Oh, and if you want to support the show, I have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/HaveGuitarWillTravelPodcast. Here's my friend Matthew. Hey there, Matthew.
Got you. Hi, James.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, great. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good. Thanks so much for having me. So I was just going to ask where you're located.
I'm in California, in Napa, California.
Oh, right on. Great. Yeah. Cool.
You are in Boston right now?
Yeah. I'm in a little town between Boston and Providence the last 4 years.
Oh,
big
really?
Big change from New York after 20 years there. So yeah, it's cool though.
Yeah. So what's your commute look like to get to Berklee? It's
easy. That was sort of part of the reason I picked this town, really not knowing anything about it, because it's on a commuter rail.
Okay.
It's door to door. It's 40 minutes. Schools are good. There's a lake in town. It's cool.
All right. Right on. Very good.
Yeah.
And so you've been teaching at Berklee for 4 years now?
Yeah, that's what brought me up. That's what brought me up here.
Okay. Yeah. And what are you teaching besides obviously guitar?
Yeah. My home department is the ensemble department, and so it's mostly like coaching small bands, and then about a third of the time there is teaching guitar lessons. Yeah.
The private guitar lessons.
Yep.
All right. Very good. Very good. And before there, you were at the New School?
I was doing I taught adjunct at the New School and adjunct at Peabody a little bit, but
wow.
I was pretty late to it. New School was very informal. They have kind of a particular way of doing things where students can just kind of study with whoever they want to in New York.
Oh, wow.
And, but the pay just runs through the school, and then Peabody was a pandemic thing. So really, this Berklee thing is my first real kind of foray into any teaching.
Yeah, and
cool.
So you've been just playing music this whole time.
Yeah,
and it's tough. It's tough for everybody, but I can only imagine playing instrumental jazz music.
Well, it's like it was like. Really, it was more just the trade-off of being away from home so much, and I have little kids and just feeling like looking for a way to find a little more balance with that, and not having, because prior to this, really, it was like 95% of my living was involved, getting on a plane and doing the thing.
Yeah, exactly. The album is gorgeous. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And the depths of styles that are on it are also pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Did you record that in Providence or Boston or New York?
No, I in LA actually.
Oh,
I went to there's a studio there called NRG that first worked at 2014. The first record I ever did with Esperanza Spalding was recorded there, and I knew nothing about it. Uh-huh. And I loved the studio. I loved the engineer, and we just stayed friends and kept in touch. And he recently took it over, and so we went out there for 3 days and did it there.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's great. And the drummers and so who all is playing on the record with you?
Yeah, so there's a lot of folks. So the core band, a drummer named Eric Dube, who's one of my oldest and dearest friends, and he's played with everybody from Sarah Jarosz to Chris Thiele to Paquito de Rivera to Whitmer. And we actually went to Berklee together. We were roommates 20 years ago, and that's where we in New York when we first moved after school. He's in the band. Kyle Miles is a great bass player from Boston who's tours with Michelle and Degiacello and lots of other folks like that. Unbelievable musician.
Sure.
Chris Fishman, keyboard player. who's from LA, and he's on the Pat Metheny tour right now, which
Wow.
is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then Josh Johnson, the alto player, and just total unbelievable musician and conceptualist who's like, really getting out there doing lots of different things. Most recently, he produced this record with me, but more on a much bigger scale, he produced Flea's solo record.
Oh,
that
wow.
one's sort of just coming out, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the core band, and then there's like lots of guests like Terry Lynn Carrington and Jeff Parker from Tortoise, and Dylan Day, who's a great up-and-coming slide player, and Joel Ross, vibraphone player on. So lots of folks. It's as you know, it's everybody knows each other. It's sort of a small community.
And the slide song, the song that you had, I don't remember the name of it, but that was just wild. I loved it. It was fantastic.
Yeah, that's Dylan, Jeff, and I, and Dylan's playing all the slide stuff. I love that too. That might be one of my favorites on the whole record. I love that song. Dylan just plays unbelievably on that. Yeah.
And you grew up in Toronto?
I did. Yep.
Yeah. What was the music scene like when you were a kid up there?
Man, there was a really, really strong. There's always been a really strong music scene, and there was a particularly strong lineage of jazz guitar playing in Toronto, and I've often wondered if it stems from, I think that from my perspective, it stems from Ed Bickert, who, played with Paul Desmond and was Jim Hall often cited as being his favorite guitar player. Sure. And I know Lenny Breau lived in Toronto for a long time, and I wonder if Lenny and Ed were friends. I don't know, or how much they interacted, but they have a similar style to me in terms of how they voice chords, and there's a whole lineage of players that kind of come out of that. I was exposed to that, really, really early on, and constantly. So it was a great place to be into guitar and improvised music. Yeah.
Was jazz your thing from the very beginning, or were you no?
No, the first song I learned was "Smells Like Teen Spirit." Oh. So no, I mean, I just wanted to be in bands and be able to play the music that was so intrinsic to the culture that I was enmeshed in and interested in and excited about. I did what many others have done and will continue to do, and got a guitar right at about 11 years old. So,
and were you? Yeah. So you were studying? Were you studying jazz, or were you studying?
No. I was just kind of picking up songs by ear. I think I immediately just joined a band with some friends, and when I could play, about 3 or 4 chords, and that was the first 5 years of playing for me, and I loved every bit of it. I loved the community of it. Sure. I loved the social element. Yeah. I loved writing songs immediately. I loved the expressiveness of it. I immediately really felt like I found myself in that and found my people in that world. And then I had a friend whose dad was really into jazz and improvised music, and sort of was turning us on to all, like Monk Records and Miles Records, and
sure.
And Coltrane Records and Bill Evans Records, and I just was like, it was like confounding to me. It was amazing to me. I thought it sounded beautiful, but I also had no idea how anybody could do anything like that. And so it was like, I think my initial draw to it was equal parts like an immediate kind of emotional connection to it, and also feeling just like I need to like, how does anybody do that? I need to figure out how to even do that a little bit, So.
Yeah, and what about classical music? Were you exposed to classical at all? No.
My first instrument was piano, and and I was going through a lot of the pieces that young pianists are exposed to and learn to play, but never on guitar. No, that was never part of my guitar playing life.
Okay, all right,
yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Probably would have helped me out a lot, but
And so, I mean, you talk about the camaraderie and stuff. Were you playing in bands in high school?
I was, yeah. I grew up in around the corner from this really pretty iconic and guitar shop in Toronto called the 12th Fret, which is still there. Yeah, and I used to just hang out there all the time. There was all these teachers around there, and also all these great luthiers there, and took some lessons with a guy named Dave Dunlop, who's a great guitar player and an unbelievably nice guy. And he actually tours as a duo with Rick Emmett now. That's what he's been doing for a long time. And Dave was probably in his early 20s, and I was right out of school at Humber College, and I would go and we just kind of learn songs together, Okay. And he would I would go, hey, I want to learn this Jimi Hendrix solo or something, and he'd kind of help me find my way through it. And he introduced me to some guys who were a little older than me in high school, and we joined it. We had a band all through high school. It was just the best thing ever.
Yeah. And so were you guys playing clubs or parties?
Yeah. We were playing clubs. It was like, it was the late 90s, and it was like I feel like there was like a battle of the bands like every weekend, you know? Sure. And so, and you'd get your stack of tickets from the promoter, and you'd sell them all to your friends and do the whole thing. And so the first show I ever played was at a club in Toronto called the Opera House, which has been there forever, which is also kind of a famed spot. And for, somehow we kind of unbelievable, as I'm saying, we won this battle of the bands, and I sort of thought, hey, this is it, man. This is it for me. I'm totally into this. And I was hooked.
You went to music school after high school?
Yeah, it was kind of in a circuitous way. I applied to a jazz program at the University of Toronto and was like totally rejected. and my mom said, like, hey, there's this like week-long guitar thing that you could go to at this place in Boston called Berklee. You should send them a tape. Yeah. And I sent them a tape, and they gave scholarships to go do those weeks at that time. Uh-huh. As I recall. And I went and did that week. And during that week, I auditioned for a scholarship to attend the school. And I got in, I got a scholarship, but I still had to come up with money to pay my, room and board and all that stuff. And so I left my parents' house and went to a cruise and got on a cruise ship at 18 and spent, last half of being 18, first half of 19 on a boat and playing in a show band, and then went to school the following year. Yeah. You
went to this week-long program at Berklee. And did you immediately fall in love with Berklee?
I did. I think that I again, it was about like the peers that I met there, and the faculty. And I felt kind of seen and accepted there in a way that I hadn't ever before, It was really cool. It felt like, didn't feel rigid, and it felt like something new and that I hadn't experienced where I was from, It was really cool.
Yeah. Did you have a private teacher there? Much like
I did, yeah. Yes, yeah. I had a number of people. The people that I spent the most time with was Mick Goodrick, and I overlapped for a year. I think while I was there, it just happened to coincide with the year or a year and a half that Wayne Krantz was teaching there.
Oh, wow.
And he was, just like, had an enormous impact on me.
Yeah, of course.
Rick Peckham also, and Tim Miller, who was like in his, had to have been in his early to mid 20s at that time,
uh-huh.
So those are the people that I was around a lot there as guitar teachers.
Yeah. Was Jim Kelly there when you were there?
Yes, I see Jim every Monday now. I think we teach in rooms next to each other on Mondays.
Right on.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. Is he a friend of yours?
I studied with him while I was there.
Really? Oh, that's so cool. I gotta tell him that we met. That's cool.
Yeah. And his method book is one of my favorites of all.
I gotta check it out.
It's basically he just has pieces that he composed.
Yeah.
And then he has all the music, and he was teaching out of it for a while. That's
so cool. I have an enormous amount of respect for Jim. He's such a great musician and a lovely person. Yeah. That's really cool.
So when you started getting into jazz, who were your guys? Who were the people you were listening to?
Yeah. Like at first, like I was saying, like being from Toronto, I would go and see Ed Bickert all the time.
Okay.
And a really early influence for me was Grant Green,
Sure, of course, yeah.
And I loved I loved it because I could hear what he was playing. I could sort of I could pick up some of it and play it on my own. I could transcribe it, and like it was like so tasteful and so clear and melodic, and there was so much language, and it was like. But it was accessible in this great way for me, and so I feel like I really connected to that. And I remember actually on that cruise ship spending a lot of time transcribing a lot of his playing on a record called Standards, which is a trio record, and feeling like that really connected the dots for me or gave me a point of entry to like playing through chord changes, that weren't sort of centered around a particular key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you were working on the cruise ship, were you playing jazz?
Yeah, doing my best to. Yeah, it was like you would do the show band stuff, and then you would play these cocktail hours and stuff. And I remember, I had a friend who knew the guy that booked all the musicians, and he said, "Look, I'll get you a job, but you have to, there's a lot of time where you're just kind of sitting around, and so you got to promise me you're not going to waste it, and so you promise me you're going to practice and use the time and so I took it seriously, and I did, and I had my mini disc player, and I would record myself, and I was really giving it all I had, and I was around some great musicians on that boat who were happy to share their knowledge with me as well too.
Sure. Was it international, much like Berklee is now? The boat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Cool. Yeah.
What were the living conditions like in the boat? Were you in the belly of the boat?
You bet. Yep. It was like going from my bedroom at my parents' house to the belly of the boat, the crew quarters, and my first roommate was a guy, great piano player named Hugo from Venezuela, and he looked out for me. He was probably 15 years older than I was, and he was a great musician, and he was studying with a guy actually in Boston, like a legendary teacher called Charlie Banakis, and it was all via cassette tape, and it was like correspondence,
Wow.
And so like he would pick up his lesson tape at the crew center in Miami every Sunday, and then he'd like do his lesson, and then he'd let me have the tape and listen to it. It was
right on.
Yeah, it was cool. It was like a nice community of people.
So did you end up graduating from Berklee?
I did. I did it in 3 years because in Canada at the time there was a fifth year of high school.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those credits were like what I guess what are called AP credits. So like sure. I was able to So I was able to do it in 3 years.
Right on. Good for you.
Yeah.
That saves money.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
And what did you do once you graduated?
Yeah, so I was pretty lucky because when I was there I met a trumpet player from New Orleans who named Christian Scott, who now goes by Chief Zion Atunde Adjoa, and he's this unbelievable artist and trumpeter, and he signed a multi-record deal with Concord, and we made a record I think right at the end of school, and so I graduated and was immediately on tour, with this guy and this band. So it was like, and we did a bunch of records, and so it was enough to like, it was enough money to get me to where I could live in New York, pay my rent, and not have to work a day job.
Yeah, that's a sizable amount of money.
Yeah. I mean, it was by the skin of my teeth, but it was like, sure. Made it work.
And were you doing anything else besides? You weren't working a day job, but were you like busking or anything like that in New York?
No, I was getting out and meeting people. I was going to shows and hanging out and trying to meet other musicians. And at that time, there were a lot of, I had a lot of community there from people who had graduated from Berklee.
Sure.
It was a pretty special time. And there was a real culture at that time amongst my group of friends of people just getting together in each other's houses and playing each other's music and practicing together, So that's sort of how we spent our days.
Yeah. Nobody would get in trouble for being too loud and.
And miraculously, no, I don't know how that happened, but we sort of managed to keep it cool.
So that first guitar that you got, what was it?
Oh my gosh! So it was a black and white Mexican made Fender Stratocaster.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, and it was great. And then I think I traded it up for, I can't even remember. I think a Japanese made Tele thin line, or sure. I think that was the second one, and I kind of traded up and up and until I got a 1988 335, which is right over there, and that was and I loved that guitar. I played that for years, and now I mostly play Telecasters. Yeah.
Is there any particular Telecaster that's your favorite out of all of them?
It's funny. I was playing these Teles by that are made by a company called Mulan in Seoul.
Wow.
It's this builder who's incredible, and it's a one-man operation. And Young Jun makes these unbelievable guitars that are like like really to spec, from like and meant to be these perfect replicas of various eras of Fender guitars.
Sure.
And during the pandemic, like the one that I was playing, it just needed a whole bunch of work, and no one was open, and I couldn't get it fixed, and so I ended up with Fender. Sent me this like a reissue of a Broadcaster.
Oh wow!
And like they made them for a year. It was like the 75th anniversary Broadcaster, and it was just a cool guitar. And so I've really just kind of been playing that since 2021 when they sent it to me. And it's like I don't know that it's anything particularly rare or fancy, but it feels good.
Exactly.
And it's like it has an ash body, and as far as I've heard, I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard that Fender's not making ash body guitars anymore.
Oh, I wouldn't know.
But yeah, me neither. But that's what I heard. But I really like it. It's really transparent sounding, and
is it good just stock?
Yeah, it's just stock.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so going from a neck on a 335 to a tele neck, are they similar, the neck styles? No,
not at all. It took a lot of adjustment. I played this 335 for years, and the switch was sort of preempted by, like, in 2014, I started working with the bassist and vocalist Esperanza Spalding.
Sure.
And the first project I did with her was this record, Emily's D Plus Evolution, and it was like this real, like, Tony Visconti produced it. It was this like real, like, kind of heavy power trio thing, and I showed up with my 335, and it just kind of wasn't doing what I needed it to do for me, and I thought, gosh, let me just try something else, and Young June, the Mulan people sent me a telly, and it was sonically it was great, but it was a really hard adjustment, right, because of the scale length and I like to play 12s, and at that time I was playing even a heavier set on the 335, and so it took a lot of getting used to, but it was sort of like a trade-off that at the time I was willing to make, and I was sort of like, because I'd been playing that 335 for so long, I was going back and forth between the two of them. I would play the telly with Esperanza, and then other stuff I would go back to the 335, but it just felt it was hard to go back and forth, and over time, sort of naturally, I just gravitated towards playing the telly all the time, and that's just what I've done for the last 10 plus years.
Yeah. What about amps?
I've for a long time I've played Voxes. So,
oh really? Wow.
Yeah, I just love AC30s. Yeah.
They're heavy, but that's nothing wrong with that.
yeah. They have a quality that I think is, like, really unique to them. Where, like, and of course, like, it's also much about how they interact with the way that you play, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, and so it's not like so I know lots of people, like, sound absolutely fantastic playing through a Fender Twin or even like a deluxe, a 66 deluxe reissue or something like that. Sure. But I couldn't make it work for me, and I would always feel like for me it was like the things would get kind of like it would lose body in the upper register and be kind of and feel boomy to me in the lower register, and I felt like, and for me, like an AC15 too, but an AC30, like the Vox stuff felt more. It just felt it felt like there was it was not as thin in the high register for how I played, and not quite as overwhelming in the low register. So yeah.
Is it just a recent AC30 or is it an older one?
So I have a 62, and I have a couple of the newer hand wired ones, which I really like too.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah,
that's great.
With the green, I'm partial to the greenback speakers.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
So when you're touring, are you touring with the band that's playing on the record?
The
core band?
Yeah, it'll be the core band on that record. Yeah, maybe minus Chris Fishman, who's because he, as I think I mentioned earlier, he's on a year-long Pat Metheny tour right now. So
yeah,
that's
fantastic. And I mean, and you're making ends meet by, it's expensive to tour with all those people.
Oh my God. I mean, it's like, I'm not touring with that group nearly as much as I am as a side person still. And so really what the way that it shakes out is I make my living touring with other people and teaching at Berklee and funneling that into my own stuff and
hoping it pays.
And getting to walk away with a little bit, or at least not being in the hole, at the end of something.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. And do you find yourself mostly on the coast? So you have one date in Dallas I saw, but are you mostly on the coast?
So, essentially. And then usually like what it's looked like historically for me is like, just some spot dates on the coast and then a healthy run in Europe. And then, ideally a few nights in one of the clubs in Tokyo. And that'll usually do it. So bit by bit, trying to build it up and make it a bigger part of the equation in terms of the balance,
It's great that you can make it work. So a spot date in Tokyo that's not cheap, getting everybody there.
Well, it's so interesting, right? Because there's some opportunities there, like with Blue Note and Billboard and a number of other clubs there that will, they'll give you 3 dates and they'll fly the whole band out and everybody can do fine,
Yep.
But it's like, there's a pretty established infrastructure for a lot of these venues that seem to, especially in Europe, that seems to not be. It's a different economy than like the rock and roll economy. Where it's just like it's not hard. They're not hard tickets, right? They're not totally dependent on ticket sales alone to sustain themselves.
Yeah. Are you booking yourself, or do you have an agent that does this?
I have an agent in Europe, but for the States, it's myself. And
really,
oh yeah!
Congratulations, you're doing a great job.
Well, hey, I don't know about that, but it's like I said, it's just sort of. I've worked with different people over the years, but in a lot of ways, I'm with my own stuff. I haven't put out a record in 5 years, and this is I'm sort of starting over in that regard, And post pandemic, and I'm working hard at it, and I'm learning lots. It's something that I really want to, that I've really intentionally and seriously shifted my focus towards. So we'll see how it all goes,
Yeah. Well, the album's wonderful, so
Thank you so much.
It's just getting people to listen to it and come to the shows. That's the hard part.
That's right.
Apart from the 335 and the tellies, what's the rest of your collection look like?
Yeah, I have a lot of I have a lot of guitars by Moulin that they've generously sent me. I have an older, it's a 56 Martin 00M. So it's like that mahogany built. And I recorded I made a solo record called Pittsburgh on that guitar in 2021. And that's a guitar that I play really, really often, that I love.
Yeah.
Amp-wise, the other stuff that I find myself playing a lot is I have a 66 Princeton that I love and play often.
Yeah.
I have a 62 Showman.
Wow.
which I bought when I was when I first moved to New York. I was like. I took a bunch of lessons with Adam Rogers, and I loved. I still just think he's an unbelievable person, and like one of the best to ever do it. And someone I've always really admired. And he had a Showman, so I thought I should get a Showman too. Maybe I'd sound like him. So that one kind of, I don't play that one as much anymore, just because it's like. But it's because it's a head, and I got to have a cabinet for it and all that stuff. But I find myself, I have more stuff than I. It's like I have a lot of stuff, and I find myself continually just going to the 335. I mean, to the telly and the AC.
Yeah. Right on. And so when you play shows, when you're playing shows in Europe, are you doing backline, or are you taking stuff with you?
If it's with, it depends. Like if it's fly dates and whether it's with Franzo or Terry Lynn or another artist or myself, it's all backline. And I mean, the only time I've taken stuff with me has been on domestic bus tours with Esperanza in the States. That's it. Yeah.
And are you still using AC30s if it's a backline? Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Are they pretty reliable?
Yeah. That was the other thing. I found them to be more consistent than the Fender reissue stuff for me. They sounded more they sounded just like night to night. It felt like I was getting, more. They were more consistently the same than different. And I was finding that I used to backline deluxes, and I would find that like, it would feel like entirely different amplifiers.
Yeah. They probably beat the shit and repaired it.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
everybody asked for a deluxe, and
I know
the AC30 not so much. Like so
yeah.
they're probably in better shape.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm sure that's right. Yeah, exactly. They probably all groan and they go, "Oh man, I got to load that on the delivery truck." But other than that, yeah.
Yeah. So apart from music and everything, what do you do for fun? What do you do?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm pretty busy. I have three little kids. I have a 9-year-old. I have a 9-year-old son, a 10-year-old stepdaughter, and an 8-year-old stepson. And and so it's pretty full on between the touring and the teaching, and then like everybody's baseball practice and this kind of stuff and running around. It's a pretty full schedule. But I mean, like, I think that it's actually that's going back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, I think the fun I have is the touring, it's such an unbelievable thing to kind of have built into your life, especially when you get to do it with your friends,
Yes,
so
exactly.
Yeah, there's really nothing like it. So I feel really, really fortunate to get to do that on a regular basis.
Oh, yeah. Right on.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, and it's great to meet you, Matthew.
Yeah, you as well.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, James. I appreciate it.
Best of luck to you, and I'm sure you'll do well. You're already doing great.
Thanks so much. Thanks for taking the time.
My pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
Okay.
Okay.
Talk to you soon.
later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to Have Guitar Will Travel. You can catch up on all the things I'm doing at thedeadlies.com. And I'm on all the social media platforms as well. And please support Vintage Guitar and all the wonderful things they do, because they do many, many wonderful things for us guitar players. Thanks. Please subscribe. Please tell a friend. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys. Thank you.